Hello, in this presentation we will compare QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop. Hello, in this presentation we will set up new employees within QuickBooks Online. Here we are on the QuickBooks Online dashboard. We will be continuing with the Get Great Guitars problem. If you've been working along with us, that's great. If not, we'll be entering payrolls at this time, or not payroll, we'll be entering employees at this time. To do that, we're going to go to the left-hand side and we're going to go down here to the employees section on the left-hand side. Now at this time we don't have the payroll set up, but the adding of employees will be the same either way. What we're going to do is go down to this icon here and say we want to add an employee. And it's going to say need pay employees. We're going to say not right now. We're not going to set it up. If we go over here, it's going to go through our payroll options. We're going to say go to the employee setup. What we now have is the Employee Information tab, and this is going to be including all of the personal information for the employee and some of the billable information for the employee. What we do not have right here is going to be the withholding type of information, things we typically get from the W-4. We would have to pay for the service in order to implement that information. At this time, we're just going to be entering the employee data for a new employee in terms of their personal information. The other information related to payroll is something that we typically get from the W-4. This is the information that would differ depending on how we're going to be setting up the payroll, whether it be in QuickBooks or through a third party. Either way we do it, we're still going to have to look at this information so that we enter it into our system, as we'll do later, either in terms of the payroll process to actually process the payroll and calculate the withholdings, or in terms of a third-party software where we still have to take that information and put it into the system. So if you've seen the W-4, this is basically going to be a form we file whenever we have a new employee. And in essence, it's going to have the employee tell us their information, typically a lot of their personal information that we'll put on this form, including the name, social security number would get from this form, the W-4. But it's also going to include the number of exemptions and the marital status, two key components that we will need in order to process payroll. The components needed to process payroll include the payroll status, married or single. It includes the number of exemptions, which kind of coincides. You can think of them kind of like the exemptions that will be on the 1040, meaning we get an exemption for ourselves and any dependents. But that's not going to be exactly the same. In any case, we need that information in order to calculate what the payroll withholding amount will be. That typically comes from the W-4. Let's go back to filling in the data into QuickBooks. This will go through our screens that we need to set up in order to get payroll up and running. So we'll start through here, and it's good to just get practice with the data input to just use the tab button. So I'm going to start up at the top left and just tab through it. I'm not going to put a title. We're going to tab. I'm going to put the first name is going to be Adam. I'm going to tab through no middle name, and I'll put the last name as Hamilton. And that's how we have it spelled here. So and then we're going to say that's good. And then the display name will then show here. We could select the drop down if we want to display it at a different format, such as last name, comma, first name. Then we'll scroll through here. We're going to say, we'll tab through to the street address, and we'll add the street address. Obviously, this will be a fictitious person and street address. We're going to say 1423 2nd Street. And we'll have the city of New York. And we're going to have the state and the zip code. We'll keep scrolling through here. Email, we're not going to have an email address. That's going to be useful if you want to keep that email address, of course, on your records. It's not required, however, in order to process payroll. So we're going to leave that blank. Phone number, same thing. We would want to have that in our database program, however, not generally required for the processing of payroll. Mobile phone, something to have good information to have. Billable rate. This is not the rate that we're going to pay the employee. It's the rate that we're going to bill the employee if we're to make it an invoice based on their billable time. We're not going to have anything there at this point. It doesn't really have to do with payroll necessarily. It has more to do with the invoicing based on this employee time. We then have the employee ID number. That's going to be the social security number for the US, which will be 565655665. Obviously, that's a made-up social security number, but it would be in that format if it was a social security. ID number we don't have at this point. We're going to say the gender, male, and then we have the hire date. We're going to say the first month of our operations, which is January 01/01/21. So 01/01/21. Then we're going to have, and there's not a release date, meaning they're still with us. And then we're going to have the date of birth, which we're going to say is 09/05/79. 09/05/79. So, okay, so that's going to be our information here. We're going to say save. So when we save that, of course, we see in our employees section our new employee. We're going to add one more and go through this process one more time. To do that, we'll select the add an employee up here in the upper right. We're going to say not right now at this point. And we're going to go through this process again, just tabbing through here. Once again, I'd practice tabbing through. It's going to say tab. First name is going to be Erica, tab. Last name, tab, last name, Robertson. That's how we spelled it. All right, tab. And then once again, the default, we're going to keep the default as what it is. We could check another common writing last name, common first name. We'll keep this as it is. We're going to type in the street address and the address. We're going to put this at 4 East 2nd Street. And the city, we're going to put New York. State, New York, zip code 10003. County, no notes. Email. Once again, nice information to have, not necessary for the processing of payroll, good to have in a database program. However, same with the phone number and email. Billing rate, remember, is our billing rate that we would put on the invoice if we were using their time to create the invoice of what we would charge a customer. Then we're going to have the employee number, in our case, social security number. So we will put the 454545544, which obviously is a fictitious number. We don't have an ID at this point. We're going to say female. The hire date, once again, we're going to say 01/01/21. That's the first date that we're going to be starting operations here in our practice problem. That's why we're going to put it on the first date of operations. Release date, we don't have one. She's still with us. And we're going to say date of birth is going to be 12/31/1979. So December 31st, 79. We're going to go ahead and save that information, and that will give us our 2 employees here. Now that we have these here, they will be listed in our employees, and if we want to see the information about our employees, we can go in here and we can see that information. We can add any notes that we want to into this section. And if we wanted to see a report based on this, we can see reports as well, listing the employees that we currently have by going to the reports section. And there's different reports we could run. We just want an information list in terms of who the employees are. So we could have an employee contact list that we're going to take a look at. So we'll select the contact list, and this will give us the employee contact information. Now obviously we have limited information here, just the 2 employees. We didn't put in the phone number and the email and whatnot, but this will give us our contact list, our contact information, and if we had put those information in, we would have those listed here. We're going to go ahead and export this to Excel. So we're going to select the export, and we will export to Excel. Obviously, you could do this for a quick PDF file too. That's another way to have the PDF file. I'm going to keep going to Excel. I like the idea of processing to Excel because some of the reports that we process to Excel, we can then adjust after they're in Excel, and that could be a useful tool in many cases. We will then enable the editing. So I'm going to say enable editing, and let's put this on the screen. And so it looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. We're going to go to File and Save As. We'll browse and look for the location that we want to put this in. I'm going to put it in something called Excel 6 documents. Now again, we probably could get rid of the name, but this could be useful depending on who we are giving this information to. If it's always our company, we know it's Get Great Guitars, we can remove the Get Great Guitars, put just the employees. Might be useful to actually put a date to when you're starting to export these things, because that'll give you a contact list by the date that you generated the contact list. But we're going to go ahead and save as the default here. There we have our 2 employees. Hello, in this presentation we will go through the process of setting up new employees within QuickBooks Pro 2018. If you've been following along with our problem, that's great. We will continue with it. If you have not, that's okay. We're still going to be putting information in terms of a new employee. So if you're looking for that process, we can see what happens within that process. If you're following along with us, we are on the Get Great Guitars is the store that we are setting up. We sell guitars. And if you want to have the file exactly where we left off after the prior presentation, where we have set up the company and then entered customers and entered beginning balances and actually set up the payroll and now are at the point of entering employees, then if you have the backup file, you could then restore just to make sure we are at that exact point. And if you made any errors in the past, then we'll all be starting at the same point. So if you have the backup file, you can go to File and restore the backup file, and then we'll all be on the same page. If not, and you just want to see how to set up company new employees within a company within QuickBooks, then that's fine too. We will work through that. Note, however, that last time we went through the setup of payroll. So the last presentation, we actually set up the payroll, which is down here. We are currently in the Home tab, by the way. And of course, if you don't have the Home tab open, you can go to the Company Preferences Home tab. I also recommend having the Open Items window open on the left-hand side by going to View and then going to the Open Window List. That way we can toggle through the open windows. The only open window at this time, the Home tab. Within the bottom of the Home tab, we see the employee kind of format here, of course. We could enter time, and then we could pay employees, and then we can pay liabilities. So this, of course, would be the normal flow. That's the beauty of the picture here. That's the nice thing, a nice setup that we have on the Home tab within QuickBooks. However, note that many times people don't always use the time entry option. That would be similar to clocking in or recording the time calculation. The nice thing about it is that it ties into invoicing and so when you enter the time kind of in a timesheet format per employee, it'll enter the time and it'll also put that into any kind of invoice if it's relevant, if we put jobs into there, and it'll create the payroll as well. But there's external software that sometimes people like to use outside of QuickBooks to do that, and you don't have to do that. We could put the time that was worked for the week into the payroll system. Also note that there are different options. There's at least 3 different options, and we're using the manual option here, which is kind of like a 4th option for payroll. The 3 different paid options vary in terms of how much you're going to pay and how much you're going to get, obviously. And the basic version really comes down to how much is going to be automated with the system. The federal taxes, typically QuickBooks has an easier time with because they're standardized across all the states. The state taxes can be more complex. If you're thinking about whether or not to run payroll through QuickBooks or run it through an outside system, you want to discuss that with your CPA or someone to advise you on that. I would get a third-party advice on that, as well as talk to the payroll individuals, just so you have a third-party independent objective opinion along with the vendor that you're thinking about, such as Paychex or ADP, which are great tools. But in this case, we have the manual system set up. So when we make new employees, the system's going to be pretty much the same no matter which type of payroll we have set up, whether we have the 3 different tier paid versions or the manual version. We're going to have to basically set up the same, customer information. How do we input that data? We need items in terms of are they hourly, are they going to be salary, and then set up their their wage information, which we typically would get their wage information, what we agreed on, and then their marital status and their exemptions that we get from the W-4. So note that, of course, that type of information, a lot of it you're going to have to basically agree on beforehand. What's the pay rate going to be, and is it going to be hourly or salary? So we're going to basically give that information here. And then in terms of just the IRS, we're not going to get into too much in terms of what's the requirement for setting things up, but the W-4 is going to be a standard type of form that will help us to calculate the exemptions for new employees. So this is often where we can think of we're getting this type of information from the W-4, which will provide the number of exemptions. It'll have the first name, last name, address, city, state, and marital status, which are going to be the required information that we will need when we are entering this data for new employees into the QuickBooks. To start off, we're going to go to the Employee Center. Now, you could go to the Employee Center down here in the Home tab, but I like to go through the drop downs because no matter what's open, you can always go through the drop down, so you can find the same place here by going to the Employees and then the Employee Center. And here we have the Employee Center. And now, of course, we're going to enter new employees, which would be listed on this part here, and then give some information about the employees that we are currently selected on over on the right-hand side. We need to enter a new employee, so we're going to go up here. We're going to have new employee, and we're going to enter the data for a new employee. Now, note just a quick overview of the tabs here. We have quite a bit of information that we got to put in to here. So let's just give an observation of what we're going to be dealing with, and then go ahead and start entering the information. You want to have all the information in front of you before you start really doing this, because otherwise you're going to get half the information in. You're going to have to run around and get the rest of the stuff. So obviously, a lot of the stuff we would get from the W-4 would be a good resource to have. If you have that, you probably have the information needed to complete this. We're going to get this information from a slide. So we have our prior slides and our instructions, and I'm just going to fill in this information in accordance with the set of instructions from a slide. So we're going to need the first name, the last name, that would be on the W-4. We're going to need print as, that'll fill out automatically. We need the social security number, that'll be on the W-4. Gender, W-4, I believe that should be on there. We're going to have the date of birth. We need the marital status, that'll be on there. And citizen and status there. And then we're going to have disability. This is stuff that we don't always need to, we're not going to be filling it out in this case, so that's going to be the added information. And then we have these three tabs on the left-hand side: address and contact, additional information, payroll information. That's kind of like the key one we're going to have to get to. And then we got the employee information. So let's take a look at those. We've got the home address, obviously address here, state. We've got the phone number. Some of these are not going to be required fields, and some of them are fields that we will not be filling out here, although it is a good place to enter this information. So it's nice to have this information within your database program. If this is your go-to place, of course, in order to have contact information, or just another place that is convenient to have it, then you want to make sure to put, you want all that information in there, obviously. Then we have the additional information, and I'm going to skip that and go to the Payroll tab. This is where we're going to enter the how often we pay them. Do we pay them monthly, bi-weekly? What are the other options? Weekly, semi-monthly, quarterly, or annually? Of course, the most common options are going to be weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, and monthly. Now, the difference between semi-monthly and bi-weekly can be a little confusing because you would think they would be kind of the same, but they're slightly different. They're going to actually result in different pay periods, because if we pay bi-weekly, we pay every other week, whereas semi-monthly, we pay basically in the middle, the 15th, and the end. So semi-monthly, we would take 12 times 2, we'd be paying 24 times. But if we pay semi-weekly, we're paying every 2 weeks. And in that case, we take the number of weeks, which would be 52 weeks, and we basically divide by 2. 52 divided by 2. We actually have 26 pay periods. So that's a bit confusing. There's a slight difference between those two, so just be mindful if you're thinking about those two. Once again, if you're talking that you're going to pay someone twice a month, then you're paying, there's 12 months times 2, 24 payments. If you're going to pay them every 2 weeks, then there's 52 weeks in a year about, and you're going to pay them divided by 2, you get 26. So note, they're not exactly the same in terms of the number of pay periods, and therefore we'll have different results when we do the calculations. That's gonna be the major information. The added employee info. We'll take a look at this as well, date hire, original hire date, and so on and so forth. These are going to be the primary information: personal, address, payroll information. Okay, so back up to the personal. I'm just going to enter this data in accordance to a new employee as if we have the sheet. I'm just entering it from our data sheet, our PDF file. So I'm just going to say Adam's our first employee. That's how they told us to spell it there. I'm not sure if that's exactly, but that's what we have on the form. So that's what we're going to have here. And Social Security. We're going to say, and obviously this is not actual information for anybody. And there we have that. It's just fictitious name here. And we're going to say they're single. And notice I'm tabbing through this information. So note when I finish the name, just for you want to tab through, that'll take you to the Social Security. Tab through the gender. Tab through date of birth. Tab through marital status. And tab through citizen. If we take the drop down, we're hopefully yes. That'll make things nice and easy. And then we're going to tab through and ethnicity. This is an optional field. I'm going to leave it blank for now. And the rest are going to be basically not required for us to get going and actually process and run the payroll. Again, if you're setting this up, you want to talk to your accountant on it and whatnot, and your CPA, and make sure you get it all set up for whatever requirements for whatever state you're in. But we're just going to get the things set up so we can run and see what the payroll looks like in a manual processing system. So the next item we're going to look at will be the address. And again, we're just going to take this information from the W-4 from our PDF file, 1423 2nd Street, we're going to say. And that's going to be New York. And I'm going to say state is, and zip 10003. And I'm not going to enter the added information. Again, it's great to have this information. I would put this information if you have it available, but it's not a required field in order to process the payroll typically. You do need, of course, the required fields of a Social Security and the address and whatnot. Then we're going to go to the additional information. I'm not going to put anything there. I'm going to go to Payroll Info. So Payroll Info. And the schedule, I'm not going to put anything in the schedule. What we do need is to choose the payment frequency. And for this individual, we're going to pay them monthly. That's the agreement. And we're going to pay a salary. So note that we're going to have to set up an item if we don't have one set up already. If we do, it would be in the item list. So note, if you go to the lists over here and go to the item list, this is where we can enter the items. We entered the information here prior to this, not related to payroll, but related to inventory items. But we're gonna try to go back over here. I'm gonna close this back out. I'm just gonna close this out. I'm back here. If we have your open windows, I'm in the new employee. If you don't have open windows open, view open windows, you can see what's open. We're gonna go ahead and list out salary. And that, of course, means that we're going to pay a monthly amount every month that will be the same. I'm going to say tab, and it's going to say salary is not a payroll item yet. We don't have it set up in our item list. And I'm going to set it up directly as we set up the employees. I'm just going to say, yeah, then I want to set up something called salaries. So I'm going to say, set that up, please. And it's going to say, do you want a payroll item to track hourly wages, annual salary, commission, or hours? And we want not hourly this case, we want the annual salary. So that's what we want it to calculate it as. That's the type of item that we're working with. We're going to say next. Is this item for regular overtime, sick, or vacation? We're going to say it's for regular pay and say next. Enter name. We're just going to call it salary. So it's going to be nice and simple. That's what we're dealing with. That's the item name, and that's what we're going to call it. And then we're going to say enter the account for tracking this expense. It's going to default to payroll expenses. That sounds reasonable. We're going to keep it at payroll expenses and finish. So there we have it. There we have the salary. Now, when we put the salary in there, we're going to say, do we want to put the annual salary or the monthly salary? Possibly could be a question. We are going to put the annual salary. we're going to say it's 55,000 a year. 55,000 a year, of course, means that on gross, we would get 55,000 divided by 12, or 4,583.33 a month. And then we would have to take out from that the withholdings that we will have to deal with once we actually process the payroll. And that's going to be great. We will also need the tax information up here. So we're on the payroll information and we're going to go to taxes up top. We're going to get this information from the W-4 typically. We have the federal and state. So we're going to say that this individual we're going to say is single. Allowances, we're going to say 1. We're going to pull this from the W-4. Extra withholding, we're going to have none. We're going to have Medicare, Social Security, federal unemployment tax. We're going to keep that as is. On the state side, note that typically we would put the state, in this case we would put New York, but I don't want to get into the weeds on the state. The state's going to change from place to place depending on where you are. We're going to keep it, since we're doing the manual payroll, we're going to keep it with just the federal here. When we do the calculations, we're going to actually manually calculate the federal income tax and the withholdings. The states, some states will have a tax system that will be similar to the federal tax system, and some states will have some that'll be different, a bit different. So we're going to continue with this. I'm going to say okay, and we're going to continue. And there we have that. That's going to be the basics of the information that we're going to need to set up the first employee. I'm going to say OK. And do you wish to set up payroll information for other or local taxes, sick, vacation? I'm going to say at this point, I'm going to leave it as is and just keep it at that point. So there's our first employee. We're going to set up another employee now, and we're going to go through the same process so we can see this again. We're going to set up a new employee. And this employee, then we're going to enter this information. Mainly, most of it would be getting it from our W-4. That is going to be Erica. And we're going to say Robertson. Again, fictitious name. And so it's going to give it that for us. Social Security. Fictitious Social Security. And gender, we're going to say female. We're going to say date of birth. And again, I'm just tabbing through this information. 12/21/79. And notice again, I just type in 12/31/79. That's the quickest way to basically type that in. And then once you select a tab, it'll put that information in. Marital status, we're going to say married. Tab. And then citizen, we're going to say yes. Tab. The other information we're going to leave blank at this time. We're then going to go to the address tab. So address and contact. This is a required information in order to process payroll. 4 East 2nd Street, City of New York. We're going to say new, and there we go again with the city. Say New York. Zip 90003. And again, I'm not going to put the rest of this information, not required typically for processing payroll, nice to have, however. Then we're going to go to the payroll information. And this individual, we're going to say we're going to pay still monthly. So not bi-weekly, but we're going to pay monthly. That's important, and don't mess that up. And then we're going to say that we're not paying this person's salary, she's getting hourly. So we're going to have to track the hours then. And so once I select tab, it's going to say once again, you do not have the hourly set up yet. And we're going to say, okay, I'm just going to set it up from here. Set that up. Do you want to set up payroll item to track hourly wages, annual salary, commissions, or bonuses? We want hourly this time. Next, regular pay, overtime, sick, vacation. We just want regular pay at this point. Next. We want the hourly pay. We're going to keep it at hourly pay. Next. And then it's going to give us the expense account, payroll expense. That's where the expense will go as we process payroll. Sounds reasonable. We'll keep the default. And say finish. And there we have that. Once again, we're going to need to set up the taxes. So we're going to go to the taxes up top. And we're going to say married this time. And we're going to say allowances, we'll say 3. And no extra medical, or Medicare, Social Security, and federal unemployment tax. We're going to keep those. Again, typically we would have the state too. We're not going to get into the state at this time. Those will change from state to state. Once we process the manual payroll, we'll have enough of a complexity to get an idea of what payroll is doing from the withholding of Medicare, Social Security, and federal unemployment to get a feel for what we would have to do through that process and what the payroll checks will look like, and then we can go from there to decide if that's the process we want, or if we want to purchase either QuickBooks Payroll or go to a third party such as ADP or Paychex. So we're going to say that will be it. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to continue. And then that is that. I'm going to say OK. And we're going to leave that as is. So there's our two then. Our two employees are going to be set up. In order to record this information then, we want to print a report for the employee information. We're going to print an employee contact list and then export that to Excel as we have in the past. And that then will be under the reports. We're going to go to employee and payroll. And I'm looking for payroll summary, payroll detail, payroll earnings, employee state transactions, payroll transaction, employee contact list. Let's go with that. And just give us the basic information that we have for the employees here. We're going to go ahead and export it. Obviously, you could print this. You could then print it as a PDF or save it as a PDF. We will be exporting it to Excel to a file we have been working with in prior presentations. If you haven't been following along, then you can export it to a new file or go back and take a look at the prior stuff. So we're going to go to the Excel and we're going to create new worksheet. And then we're going to export it, however, to an existing workbook. And then we're going to find that workbook. It's already going to the right spot because we've been doing this for a while. But we're going to go ahead and say browse. And we're going to say the section 6. That's what we want to save it under. And double click that. And then export. It takes a little bit of time, but it should then open up Excel, should export this data into a new tab like so. That new tab is called Sheet 1, and notice it's kind of in the middle of all this other stuff we've been doing, these other tabs. I'm going to take that, grab that, left click on that, and pull it to the right, and I'm going to call that Employee List. Double clicking on it and typing in Employee List. I'm going to make it a little bit larger, going to hold down Control, scroll up a bit so you can see a bit more of it. Note that you don't have the headers shown here, but there is a header. If you go back over here into the views and go to the page layout view and say OK, it'll give you the header. So that's what the header is. If you go back over here, QuickBooks has now entered a split screen. To get rid of that, you go to the View tab and you go to the Windows group and unsplit the screen. I would then save this. And that's what we have so far to this point. Again, note that the payroll is a complex component of the system, and there is real questions in terms of how much support you want to have with payroll. Even with a fairly limited number of people you're having payroll through, you may want to pay for the QuickBooks payroll and or work with a CPA and or someone who is dedicated strictly to payroll, someone like Paychex or an ADP type of third-party system. But this is how we're going to get the new employees set up within most of the QuickBooks payroll type setups. Then once we have this set up, we will run payroll. We'll actually demonstrate once we enter the data how to process payroll using these employees that we just set up and actually pay them. And then we'll see how to then process the pay liabilities, meaning we're going to have to take that information, that money we took from them, Social Security, Medicare, federal unemployment, and then our portion of the Social Security and Medicare that we have to pay for them as the company, and pay that to the Fed.